Today we are celebrating the hard work, passion, and dedication of Alma Arguello, the Executive Director of SAVIS of Halton. Thanks so much for taking the time to talk to us today. How does it feel to be a woman of influence?
Um, it feels. I never thought myself as a woman of influence. I just felt as someone that I just feel like I'm doing the work. I'm part of an amazing movement that I truly believe. Um, I I think when I was a kid, when I first came to Canada, and in the way I grew up, having a very strong mother and a very father that push us. Um, that is something that when you're a kid, you're like, oh, I want to grow up, and like you think about it. But as you do the work, you start realizing that there are other women, the folks that you support, the volunteers that you work with, your colleagues. It I never really thought myself as a woman of influence. I only see myself as a part of a movement um, that is demanding change. So I'm really honored that's even that I'm being considered a woman of influence. To be honest with you, it's a very humbling feeling.
How or when did you know that you were in the right career?
Um, I think that for I think for myself, it has always been a journey. When I finished school and I started working with the immigrant community in Toronto, and in doing that form of advocacy, I started slowly seeing the disparities of a lot of immigrants, especially young women of color. And I started seeing disparities in terms of employment, in terms of the family support that they were getting, and in terms of how community and society treated them. Not even view them; it's just how they were just treated within the universities, with all the regulatory college. Um, so once I started really humming down on that and seeing that, but I was supporting engineers, I was supporting doctors, I was supporting medical researchers that did amazing work back in their home countries, and how they were being belittled, and how their knowledge was not necessarily even being taken consideration in Canada. That's the professional, but also being a woman, and then being a woman of color, and then being a woman of color just trying to survive for your to support your family. I think that's when I really started advocating, and that's when my beginning of advocacy for women's rights really began. Is when um, someone said, I think it was Gloria Steinway says, we don't learn when we talk, we learn when we listen. And when we started really listening to, and when I started really listening to a lot of the women, and I started listening in terms of their struggles and what things we're doing, and we started really advocating. I think that is when I started going to the different ministries and truly advocating for a lot of these women on behalf of my agency at the time, is when I actually started seeing some form of a little change to them. So I think it's fast tracked me to what I currently do here at SAVIS, and the advocacy that we have done for a lot of the women in the past almost 4.5 years that I have been at the agency. Um, and it was, I guess, about 2 years ago when I got, and I'll tell you the story, when I got the rush that, yeah, this is what I want to do. We helped exit a woman because SAVIS is in a mall, and we are on the second floor of of a mall. And in the mall, there's a Shoppers and there's a Metro. And we actually exit a woman from the back door from the Metro, from a trafficker. And I drove her to the airport. And I remember after a few days, Yeah, about a few days, I think her trafficker found my information and he started harassing me. He did come after me. And it was when I think he ended up coming. Well, I can't really say it, but he did end up coming and he did threaten me. And at that time, believe it or not, I felt so empowered because he couldn't touch me. He had no control over me. He couldn't do anything. In fact, I had control over him. I had more power over him. And I was egging him on, what are you going to do? Like, what are you going to do? What can possibly going to do? You either leave right now or call the police, um, so at that part, when he left, I felt this is exactly where I'm meant, and this is what I meant to do. And I know it's kind of choppy in terms of how I said it, but to be able to have the feeling that I was able to, with a team of, again, of fierce advocate and fierce women, to support someone while they were in a traffic situation, to, in a way, outsmart this horrible manipulative man, to outsmart him to the point that they had two kids, and he was smart. He would never let her take the kids together to the grocery store. He would always stay in the car, but he would never let her bring the two children to the grocery store. So we managed that time that he let her bring the two kids to the grocery store. That's when we exit her immediately. We were able to send her out of province to her own family for safety. We were able to put supports around her to the province that we sent her to, with family, with service providers, with people who were supposed to help her with building a life, having a home. Right now she's in school, which is amazing. Then she was able to give her children a home free of abuse and free of control. And she was able to press charges as well. Yeah, sometimes at that particular moment when he started yelling and he was abusive to me, it freaked me out. But he had no choice but to leave. He had no choice but to turn around. He can't do anything to me. And I think that's when I realized this is where I'm supposed to be, because I am not afraid of them. I was not afraid of them. I have the power to actually make some form of change. And I have a team of fierce advocates who understand where we're coming from, understand what oppression is, understand what intersectionality is, understand that everybody deserves to live a life, not survive a life. And that's powerful. And that's when I think that's when I realized at that particular time when he turned around and left, and I had my holy cow moment, like that could have been wrong so many. And then after that, I put a whole bunch of things in place for security for staff. But that was the moment I realized this is where I want to do. This is my calling in a way. So ever since then, we have been putting together, advocating for social change, advocating for women's reproductive rights, and advocating for the right of an individual to live a life that they choose to live and have power over their own body.
What would you say is your biggest accomplishment?
I think that I don't have one individualized accomplishment. I think accomplishments are a sequence of little ones, that make this huge overarching impact. I think one of the many accomplishments is that because it was not, I think one of the biggest accomplishments probably would be speaking up, bringing things forward and saying this is not okay. Halton is a very unique city. It's a very unique region. So one of the it's a series of accomplishments. I don't think it's just one single, because you can't really, even within a movement, is you have to behave as do everything that we do matters, because it does matter. So I think one of the biggest accomplishments that we could say is really speaking up for a lot of the social injustice that still happens in our community, and there seems to be a form of taboo. So case review is one of the things that, as a movement of sexual violence, that is something that the sexual assault movement has been trying to do for the past 10, 15 years, and they have met with a lot of resistance in the past. And it was the spearhead of a wonderful advocate. Her name is Sunny Marner, who is a friend of mine. And Sunny worked tirelessly to create and learned the Philadelphia model of review of unfounded cases of sexual assault within the police force. And her advocacy and her passion actually made the advocate case review happen. I think it's now happening in different parts of the country now, not just within the province. But that was a conversation when the unfounded case came from Robin Doolittle, which she worked no more, but she has been in conversations with the sexual assault movement and heard all these cases not really going anywhere, even though there was forensic evidence, there were witnesses, and yet cases were not going anywhere. When that article came, I think I did went to, I did go to Mayor Burton's office, and I sat there until he saw me. And then we started talking with, at that time, the executive director, the chief of Halton Regional Police. And it created the Sexual Assault Case Review Committee. And we started doing unfounded cases of sexual assault and reviewing them and working with the police. But it wasn't that I did all that, it's me speaking up. Right. So another thing that we started speaking up is when the anti-human trafficking funding got rolled out. Right. One of the things that got left out of the conversation of trafficking is disability services, and how folks who had cognitive disability are being trafficked, and that got left out of the conversation. Also, and it was and SAVIS did a huge needs assessment around Halton region. We embarked on training, we embarked on education. We did a whole needs assessment, and we did present the needs assessment at UFT. So that was a big accomplishment for us. But again, you know what I mean? And now we see there's a new grant that came from the Ministry of MCCS, and we saw there like programs or studies for disability services. So that got included. So to me, it's not just a major accomplishment, because this is a movement. It will never really stop. Yeah, like it's never really stopped. So it's the little pieces. It's all those little pieces of when I have gotten the courage to speak up, or when I have gotten the courage to say, yeah, this doesn't feel right. This is not okay. And I have, as a woman of color and as an immigrant woman in Halton, working in a community that is predominantly white. It has been at certain times I've been left out of conversations, and I have. A friend of mine told me, if there isn't a chair for you, you better keep a foldable chair in your car, right? And move forward and speak up, because if I don't speak up, maybe we wouldn't have had case review. Maybe that committee would have never happened if we didn't do the needs assessment and speak up and actually bring it up to the ministry again and again. Maybe this round of funding, we wouldn't have looked and see that there's a disability that needs to happen. Even when we look at the Halton Collaborative Against Human Trafficking, right? That was a table that started back in 2013 by SAVIS. I wasn't around then, but we started talking about labor trafficking. And that is something that the region, as a region, we have not necessarily addressed, we have not necessarily seen, we have not necessarily looked, but we have clients who are labor trafficked, who are brought onto our region, and they are exploited by their labor. That's speaking up. So I think then I guess one of my biggest accomplishment is that I'm able to speak up and be sometimes a voice for those who don't, that can't, or that are left out. And unfortunately, that's very typical for a lot of the vulnerable communities that we come from, right? So if you look at sexual assault case review, those we're speaking up for the folks that their voices got taken away. We're speaking for labor trafficking. We're speaking up for those who voices got repressed. For disability services, we're speaking out for those whose voices are not even considered, even with MCCS. But it's being able to speak up that has been able to be, I guess, one of my biggest strengths, and not have the fear to bring hard conversations when folks sometimes are not ready. They may not necessarily be ready, but they're not having those conversations have huge effects on the lives of many folks in our own community.
What is your advice for a young woman?
That my advice would be that always behave as though everything that you do matters, because it does. You don't ever know when you're speaking up or doing something that would have an impact to someone's life. It also means don't apologize. You know, for we women, for so long, we are groomed to be the good girl, to be kind, to be hospitable, to be good hostess. And when we move into our careers, if we move into spaces, that sometimes, because we live in a patriarchal society, whether we like it or not, that's exactly it. The laws are patriarchy. The police force, it's a form of patriarchy. You know, we look at our own council, you know, and look at it from that lens. We are in a patriarchal society. So my other advice is don't apologize, because if the tables were reversed, they wouldn't apologize to you. And always seek to what you want. So if you feel that that is something that you deserve, if you feel that that is something that you want, and you have worked for it, then go ahead. You need to ask and demand, because nobody else is going to walk through that door. And you don't know that whatever door you open or you stick your foot in for someone else to come through. And with that is something that I have learned and I have seen. When I started my career and I started working with international medical doctors, those doors that I thought I would never walk through, but I wanted to advocate for those folks. Some of those gynecologists that could not practice gynecology in Canada became midwives, and did the midwifery program and are very successful. I never knew that program was going to be turned into something bigger. When I remember also another project that I was involved was called eHealth, and it was through McMaster. And I was trying to find alternative ways for doctors. So that was a way that you had a computer person or a coder, and then you had someone to package that program as the business consultant. But they needed the medical doctors, the international medical doctors, to give that feedback. One of them now is one of the top up there in eHealth, and I never realized that. Never had any idea that the doors and my fears of having a big mouth and amplifying was going to create that change. And the numbers of international doctors that have walked through and actually consultants have been amazing, that from 10, 15 years ago. And again, I'd never thought that me sitting and just pestering Mayor Burton was going to become case review. And having those conversations and bringing those issues to the community, they were very difficult. And at times, I did not feel welcome at that table. There were at times that, that the staff that I would bring with me would say, I can't do this. And I used to tell her, this is what a movement looks like. When people don't want to listen, that's when you have to persist. So that was my advice. Don't give up. You need to open that door, or take the hinges off, or stick your foot in it, because nobody else is going to do it. And you don't know who else needs to walk through those doors. Everything you do, you have to behave as it matters, because it matters to you. It would have an impact in your life. And also because of that, the actions that would come and the repercussions that would come would also have influence for everybody else. And it's positive. I know that sentence has always been used as a negative thing, but no, it's positive. And we could see it with the movements that have come through it, right? We could see it with Black Lives Matter. We could see it with Tamara Brooke. We could see it with, oh my God, even in the States, with Si Se Puede. You can see those movements coming through. So don't stop. Sometimes the biggest thing, and that's what I say, there isn't one thing of one accomplishment, because you will always have. It's a series of little accomplishments that makes it better.
Amazing. Thank you. What's next?
What's next? What's next is speaking up. What's next is being able to be in a place and truly live that women's rights are human rights. That's what's next. That we could have diversity, and we could truly have different lens and institutions that have traditionally only been only folks who have a certain privilege have always been invited to those parties or those boards, and I think that's what's next, is to truly start that systemic change, because always nobody wants to go there, and it's only when the bottom shifts that the top falls. So I still consider myself as someone that is doing frontline work and grassroots work, because if I stop doing grassroots work, then I know for a fact that's when I know I should just retire. I think that doing the grassroots work, actually, and being on the ground, it actually lets me witness and bear witness to the injustice that continues to happen within the huge institutions of power that sometimes neglect the needs of certain communities. So to me, what's next right now, and what the agency is trying to advocate, is for reproductive access rights in Halton. So that choice is not taken away. Another thing that we're trying to advocate and work together is also is creating voice and space to have Halton have an Indigenous Friendship Center. It's so important. Peel has one, Hamilton has one, and yet we have Indigenous communities in our region, and we don't have an Indigenous center where folks could go and have healing, could have community, could have ceremony. So that's what's next. Continuing to voice and continuing to use the privilege that I have as a community agency, as an advocate, and continue to use the amazing resources that I have behind me with my amazing fierce team to amplify voices that have such a huge effect to the everyday life of people has always been there, but it has never really been recognized.
Amazing. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today, and congrats on being one of our Women of Influence.
Thank you.